Awesome. Welcome everyone to Picky Eater session. Not sure if anyone else has a picky eater. I assume we all do since we're here. Feel free to put in the chat what your picky eaters are eating. My son only eats bagels, cream cheese, pizza. Oh, ice cream. I forgot to mention he eats ice cream, but it has to have sprinkles. So I am going crazy with my picky eater who's 4 years old. So anyone else has, excuse me, picky eaters that are eating funny things, feel free to put it in the chat, your picky eaters issues. Some kids might be picky eaters where they eat really, really slow. My daughter's a really slow eater, or she only eats like a little bit of lots of different things. Like she'll eat 2 blueberries, 1 strawberry, then want something new. And it's like a giant ordeal where trying different things all meal long. She has like 8 courses of 1 bite. Feel free to put any other picky eater sagas you guys may be having, and we'll address them at the end. We'll have a Q&A. So I'm just going to wait for people to start trickling in here today, as I know we're all on Friday time, so it might be a 1 or 2 minutes late. But all right, got some very picky eaters here. So cool. Well, I'll give it 1 more minute and then we can get started. Yeah, so I've actually, it's funny, whenever I look at this picture for sprinkles, I've been trying to think through or find, like if there are sprinkles that are like little vitamins or something that I could put on my son's ice cream. So then would that be great? And then all of a sudden his ice cream is actually healthy.
Yeah.
That would be really fun.
You could do like dried fruit.
I need to figure out how to make it dried fruit so it looks like a sprinkle though.
True.
There has to be a vitamin sprinkle out there. I've Googled it, but I've yet to find it. If I tell enough people, someone will actually create it. That's the hope. Cool. Well, we're 2 minutes after 11 o'clock, so let's kick this off. Hi, everyone. I'm Brooke Shapiro. I'm the founder of Sprinkles Parents. We provide education activities and resources to parents like you. I'm super excited today for this Picky Eaters webinar, and it's sponsored by Body Love Cafe. Super grateful for their help and support today. And I'll kick it over to Dr. Dufala, who will be speaking with you and sharing her insights all about picky eaters today. So I'll let you take it from here, Doctor.
All right, awesome. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I hope that I can be helpful with some of the insights that I have. And I've been, a little background on me is that I was working in a pediatric practice for a little bit. I've been exposed to a lot of picky eaters. I have a lot of picky eaters around me. And so there's many different reasons that kids may be picky eaters. So we're just going to kind of dive into them today. And if you guys have any questions, like I said, feel free to ask me them at the end. So we will jump right into the first slide. Or I'm sorry, the next slide. So one of the first reasons that we'll see kids being picky eaters is just that they are sensitive to textures. So while this one may be a given, all of you who have picky eaters at home may notice that kids tend to gravitate towards like foods that are more soft or foods that are more hard. So kind of trying to pay attention to what those foods are and why they're gravitating towards them could give you a little bit of insight. And then the ones that they do like, maybe trying to find other foods within that same category and incorporating more of those to make sure that they're getting the proper nutrition. So one of the examples I like to use is like if they really like sweet potatoes and you want to make sure that they're getting enough healthy fats in their diet, maybe you could crush up a little bit of avocado or something and then add that into maybe their eggs, or you could add it into sweet potatoes, add it into smoothies to kind of give them that same texture, but also to kind of make sure that you're giving them the right nutrition that they need as well. And then likewise, if they have a resistance to a different type of food, maybe putting some of those foods together. So if it's like harder foods, maybe putting out like some nuts together and some seeds together and some crackers and seeing if they gravitate toward one or the other. And we'll get into a little bit more about what reasons look like that might be going forward as well. Next slide. So another reason that I see picky eaters a lot in practice is that kids oftentimes can have a food allergy. And so as a parent, this is probably something that you've heard a lot about, but we do like to talk about the big 8 in functional medicine, which are the milk, the soy, the eggs, the peanuts, the tree nuts, the wheat, the fish, and the shellfish. And so the body's pretty smart and kids are pretty smart, where when they eat something and it doesn't agree with them, they tend to remember that. And their bodies tend to remember this too. So they may be avoiding foods because they remember the last time that,
Yes.
what's that? They may remember last time that they had it, that they felt a certain way, and they just don't want to feel that way again. And as a mom, you probably also notice, like, if kids eat something, whether they have like digestive changes, bowel changes, mood changes, skin changes. So those are all things to kind of hone into and pay attention to with your kids, and see if you notice there being a correlation between any of these things. We like to do specific testing for food allergies with kids because doing a full-blown elimination diet with a little one can be difficult, as you can't do it as seriously as you can with an adult. But allergy
Sorry, just trying to mute everyone. 1 second. Sorry. Doctor, did I accidentally mute you? Okay. Are you muted?
here.
Okay. Sorry
Is that
about that.
better?
Yeah, I was trying to mute someone else. Sorry about that. Please
Oh, no
ensure to
worries.
make sure everyone has their mute button on, just so we can hear doctor. Thanks.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, so allergy testing is just an easy way to eliminate some of those triggers, and that's something that we're really familiar with, and we do all the times. And a lot of times you'd be surprised what comes up on this, because oftentimes it's stuff that they were probably having in their day-to-day diet that you may not even know. So that's a different way to go about it and kind of figure out why they're being picky eaters. And then we'll jump to the next slide. They're on a food jag. So this is probably one that you're all too familiar with, but it's like when they want to eat the same thing day in and day out. I know we were just talking about this before the call. Lily was saying that she had a family member who only wanted to eat croutons for 3 months. So when this happens, who knows what the reason is for it, but just trying to be patient with them, trying to bring new foods to the table. I think one of the things I see all too often is introducing a food to a kid when they're on a food jag and them rejecting it, and then that hesitancy to kind of reintroduce it because they said no 2 or 3 times. But kids, as we know, can be very resilient. So the more exposure they have to different foods, the more familiar that they can become with them, and the more that they may start to actually accept those foods and actually start to gravitate towards those foods. And then obviously, if kids see mom or dad or brother or sister or anyone around them eating these different types of foods too, it could be encouraging to them to kind of get off the food jag and be more open to trying different types of foods. So another tactic with this too is, like, I know a lot of people will, you know, try to ask them, like, oh, who is your hero? Like, is it an athlete that they admire, or is it like a dancer or a singer? And then kind of just explaining to them that these people have to take care of themselves. They have to take care of their bodies. If you want to be strong, if you want to grow up and do these things, you have to give yourself the proper nutrition. Kind of starting to teach them about the nutritional component of it at a young age can be really helpful. And then that's something that follows them later into life too, and encourages them to keep making the right decisions, even when no one's there to tell them what to do down the road. So that can be helpful. Filling up on liquids. This is one that I see getting overlooked all too often, but a lot of times, even if it is milk or juice that kids are eating throughout the day, they can be getting full off of this. When you think about it, a lot of those liquids do have, a lot of sugars in it. Some of them have added sugar, some of them don't. But whenever, from a biochemical standpoint, the kids are drinking these juices, their blood sugar is staying high, they may not be getting the signal that they're hungry. And so, if they're not getting the signal that they're hungry, then they may not be wanting to eat throughout the day. So, ways to kind of cut back on the juices and the liquids without completely taking them away would be to just try to add in a little bit of water, looking for alternatives for drinks that um, have a little bit less of that added sugar into them, and then just like slowly over time cutting back, and then obviously trying to replace, high sugar juices and liquids with things like water when they will take it and accept it. And another kind of like clinical pearl that we see a lot is that kids will crave really sweet foods, high carbohydrate type foods like white sugars, pastas, bagels, things of those natures, when they have, we call it a candida overgrowth. So in functional medicine, we want to look at the whole picture, the root cause of what's going on. And this is one of the reasons that we'll test for, and we'll kind of see if this is another reason that they're being picky eaters and gravitating towards those foods.
Can you talk to that a little bit more? Like what that means? Like a candida?
Yeah, so candida is something that we look for. It's a mold that will it lives in the body and it can get into the gut. And when kids have an overgrowth of this, they can display all kinds of different signs and symptoms. And they're pretty broad, but as they're little, like I would say, 1 through about 6, a lot of times they will display different types of mood behaviors, digestive problems all day long. We see kids with candida overgrowth. Diarrhea, upset stomach, being constipated, being bloated. And especially, I guess, like clues to tune into when you are looking at your own kids personally is like, did they ever go through a period of time where they had recurrent yeast infections? Did they have thrush or that like white coating on their tongue a lot as a kid? And if they did, and that was never treated, or if they have had that, but they've been sick consistently and been giving multiple rounds of antibiotics, then this is a lot of times when we'll see candida being overgrown in kids. And then there's different ways to treat it. We like to take a more natural approach. We like to go with like herbs and supplements, but a lot of times when you can kind of get that in check, which is a process, but once it gets in check, kids will start feeling better. We see skin issues kind of dissipating, moods, behavior, and sleep. It's just really like a broad spectrum of what we see, but we really do see improvement with it. And then someone said, how do you know if there is candida? So there's 2 ways that we like to test for it. We like to do a stool test. When it comes up on a stool test, it's just kind of assumed that it's everywhere or it's systemic. And it can be a little bit harder to treat. The other way that we like to test for it is doing an oats test or an organic acids test, which actually is going to be another very specific way to see what is happening in a biochemical process in the body that is showing us there's candida or yeast overgrowth or other types of molds as well. So those can both be really helpful, and give us like more specific information to know what direction to go in with each kid individually, because it isn't just like a one size fits all option for everyone. And even the different levels that can show up on these tests vary. So obviously a kid that has a very low level of candida versus a kid that has a very high level of candida, we're going to want to treat differently. Was that helpful, Brooke? Okay. Okay, awesome. Oh, and then this is another good one. So when you're dealing with a picky eater, one of the best things I see is kind of saving screen time as a reward to eating. I know that it's super easy to put the phone down or turn the TV on, and kids tend to calm down and settle down, and eat. But I also see really good results when working with kids and we save the screen time or the TV time for more of a reward following meals. And the other thing too, kind of from like a evolutionary standpoint with this, is that digestion is a whole process, and we could do a whole nother call about digestion one day, but there are so many things that have to happen at the same time. And it really is one of those things that you want to kind of set your body up to be in a great condition to let digestion happen in the stages that it needs to. But number one is kind of just being in parasympathetic or rest or digest mode, so that when you're smelling the food, you can start to create saliva, you can start to create gastric juices. All this stuff works together to break down foods, so that when the food gets into the digestive system, it can be taken out into the body and fuel these little ones' bodies with the proper nutrition. So saving that screen time for after is actually a good way to stimulate that parasympathetic rest and digest, and really try to ensure that they're going to be getting that nutrition that they want and need from that food to grow, and to nourish their bodies as well. And so this is something that I see being helpful. And then kids typically end up being pretty excited too, because they're waiting for that after they eat. And then blenders are like mom's best friend. So cooking foods ahead of time can be super helpful, especially like harder foods. Like I know there are kids who are like, I don't like carrots, but then you bake them and you put a little bit of butter on it, and then all of a sudden they like carrots. So this kind of goes back to texture and consistency. But even if you could blend up some of those veggies, like on a big pan on a Sunday when you're just hanging around the house, and then have them on hand to kind of throw in a blender with maybe some like spinach or some fruits and veggies, some healthy fats, avocado seeds. This can be a really good way to sneak food into the diet that they may not necessarily gravitate toward without it. And then kind of on that note as well, if you have like a picky eater who gravitates more towards hard foods, having foods blended up in a blender that maybe you can add on top of those hard foods. So say it is like a pasta or a spaghetti that they're favoring. If you can blend up like some squash and zucchini and butter and garlic and onions and put that on top of the noodles, you're making sure that they're getting that added nutrition they need to grow and be healthy. And that's just another way I see people being able to get more nutrition to their kids in an easier way.
Yeah, I think that it's just hard to get the nutrition to your kids, and getting them to say yes, or tricking them if needed, to try it, or to get that, that kale slipped in when you're making a smoothie, right? Or anything like
Yeah.
that, I think is like the hard part, because these kids are really smart. They can taste it.
Yep.
They are stubborn sometimes, or at least my son's really stubborn. And so it's also sometimes, I think, a power struggle too with picky eaters.
Yeah. And like, I mean, some of the stuff I see that works with that is like, what kids don't like butters and fats. I feel like all kids like that. Like they love like the buttered noodles and stuff. And so um fats are one of those things that kind of get a bad rep, but really, especially with growing kids need to be getting fats in the diet. So, and keto has been such a big thing lately too. So, like, really encouraging kids to have those foods are good ways to get them to like the food. Maybe you add a little bit of butter to their veggies or whatever it is they're being picky about, and then they might like it. Or, adding those fatty avocados and seeds to smoothies, peanut butter if they don't have allergies, things that kind of give them that like satiety satisfied signal, with also giving them the things that they want and need to, and like kind of encouraging them to help out in the process, like we were talking about. Like, here's 6 things, and then they're going to go together. You pick which ones you want to put in your smoothie today, and then they're active in the process, and then they're excited about it. And as parents, you just take the time ahead of time to be like, okay, what's not going to be gross to put together, so that if they pick any of these, it's going to work.
Yeah, pretty much. No, that's a really great idea. And we can talk in the Q&A. I'm sure folks will have more questions of ways that we can slip these veggies in and get our kids to eat right. Thank you. I like the
Yeah.
blender one.
Yeah. Okay. The last thing I wanted to talk about was that kids, just like adults, can have underlying infections that are going on. We see this all too often in functional medicine. They're not eating. they have had constipation or diarrhea, we do a GI map and they're fighting some sort of C. difficile bacteria infection, which can be really traumatic on the little ones. Or there was travel and they picked up a parasite somewhere. Or they had a recent exposure and they may have mono or something. So a lot of times you'll see symptoms in kids that aren't necessarily matching up with how they are or how you know that like their normal should be. So doing additional testing and kind of looking for underlying infections that are going on with that can be a way to narrow it down too. And just make sure that their gut is in the best health it can be in and they're not constantly fighting something that's giving their immune system more of a challenge than it needs. Because as you know, when they're little, they already are building up their immune system and they don't need to take on anything extra. And then there is a word that, is thrown around a lot lately, but dysbiosis is kind of like an imbalance of bad bacteria in the gut to good bacteria. That's why probiotics have become so popular, and like fermented foods, kimchi, sauerkraut. But this test kind of hones in on which of those bacteria are low that we may want to see high, and which of those ones that are high that we want to see low may be kind of causing an imbalance. And then based off that, we can put together really specific protocols to work with these kids and really anybody to make sure that what we're doing with them is specifically tailored to them. And then creating a meal ritual. So this is something that I'm a huge fan of. There's so much talk about like sleep hygiene and sleep rituals nowadays, but I think there needs to be more of a conversation about meal rituals and kind of having like a place that we go to and we associate it with eating. We kind of get into that calm state where we're ready to eat, digest, maybe spend time with family, be in that mode where we know when we're there that this is what this space is set aside for. Just like when we go to bed at night, we have our bed, we have our favorite blanket, we have maybe like an essential oil, our blue light blockers, kind of setting up the same kind of space, that safe space for eating, so that when kids are there, the standard is kind of set and they kind of know the routine and get comfortable with it, and maybe even start to look forward to it. And then that's another thing too that is going to benefit them all throughout their life and they can bring with them to college and throughout the entirety of their future. So that's kind of all I have to say about the picky eaters. If you guys have any questions, feel free to chime in the chat and I'll kind of go through here. Did anyone have any questions based off of like anything that we talked about that you wanted me to dive a little bit deeper on?
You were just talking about gut health and probiotics. Do you feel kids should be taking those? I know that's been a big question.
Yeah, so it kind of depends on the kid and it depends on what they have going on. But overall, probiotics are shown to be really helpful. I'll use them in kids as young as 2 years old, especially when we have confirmation on tests that they are low in specific strands of bacteria that we know are going to be beneficial to them. Another thing is just through like the birthing process, we know that kids that don't have vaginal births have less gut microbes than kids who do have vaginal births. So like that's an important time to add in those good probiotics. And just making sure that when you do it, you always want to start out with lower doses with them. You're always wanting to look at like the colony forming units, and we usually start out with ones around 50, but you can start out with ones that are lower than that. I always say something is better than nothing, but different probiotics do different things. So there may be certain probiotics that benefit them more to give them based off of their symptoms and what their actual lab tests and stuff come back signifying. So overall, yes, but you can also give them probiotics in ways of like kefir milk and sauerkraut and kimchi and really those like fermented foods and things, which I'm sure, most kids are not huge fans of fermented food, but yogurt and kefir, I know a lot of kids really like those. So those are two things that you could add in without doing like an actual probiotic. And then Rebecca said, what is your opinion on telling kids no dessert until after they finish a certain amount of dinner. Um, I mean, this is something that you have to work with your kid on individually. Um, I see people do both. I see people kind of like give in and let them have a little bit of something beforehand and then they finish it after, or just saying to wait it out. But it really depends on the kid. And I mean, I think the biggest question is like, why is it that they want to have the dessert? Like, obviously, it's because it's sweet and they're craving it, but is there something else that they could eat that could mimic that, like through a more nutritious meal? And then maybe they get that same feeling that they would be getting from the dessert. So, or is it like they like the color of the dessert and they want to have something that's pink because if that's the case, like maybe we cook up some beets that are also sweet and give it to them. And maybe that's something that they like to eat as kind of a replacement. I could eat different things at different times for a period of time, but always have been picky eaters. He is the 2 percentile, and I feel like his doctor just blows it off. She has never suggested allergy testing. What allergy test might he possibly get? So there's different types of allergy tests. We typically do the allergy 88 because it shows the 88 of the most common food, both allergies and sensitivities. When you're looking at food allergy tests, it's better to be specific with what it is that they are having an allergy or sensitivity to. So if kids have true food allergies, those are IgE mediated responses where they're born with it and they could even potentially have an anaphylactic reaction to it. They don't always, but they could. They also could have a IgG food sensitivity where those are things that are going to show up a couple days later. Those are things with adults that are paying a lot of attention, start to notice like, I had gluten 4 days ago and now my joints are really achy. Like it can show up anytime from like 24 to 48 hours to 3 to 6 days later. So the testing we do kind of dives into this and then it's even more in depth than that, but that's the big picture of it. And a lot of times when you go to get food allergy testing, they will just test for like true food allergies. So you're not necessarily getting the bigger picture unless you do those two things together. So hopefully that helps. And if you guys have questions too, I don't know if you can unmute and ask if I'm like when I'm answering it, but hopefully that was helpful. My son will be 2 at the end of the month. He's always been a terrible eater. He loves liquids and made the mistake of giving him juice. Um, yeah, I mean it happens, but like I said, maybe even adding in like the water to it to try to cut back on the juice can be helpful. Giving like higher quality juices, like or even like bone broth is something I see a lot of kids really liking. If you can get bone broth ahead of time, kids will sometimes opt into drinking bone broth throughout the day. They're getting a ton of vitamins and minerals in it. Sometimes it's got a lot of like the healthy fat in it. And they're still getting that hydration in the liquid they need. So even though it's more of like a salty alternative, that's something that I see kids being drawn to also.
Is like orange juice that's like fresh squeezed or something like that still needing to get watered down, or when it's like fresh or not from concentrate, that's better than from concentrate?
Fresh is always going to be better. The way that I guess I kind of like to explain juices by themselves, which honestly, a lot of times with the littles, it's not as much of a problem as it is in older adults because littles are like always on the go. They're always moving, they're burning their energy most of the time that they're taking in. But it's never a bad thing to water it down. Fresh is always going to be better than a concentrate. But whenever you're introducing sugar into diet, whether it's through like liquid or even through food or dessert, it's always better to like for the example of orange juice, combine it with something else like a fibrous food or like blend up an entire orange in a blender and give it to them to drink. Even though it's chunky, they probably won't like the consistency, but if they do, great, because there's going to be fiber in there and that fiber is going to slow down how quickly they're absorbing that sugar into the blood essentially. So whenever you can combine like proteins, fats, and carbohydrates together, that's going to be the best way to do it. But yeah, to answer your question, fresh is always better than concentrate. And a lot of times it has like higher vitamin and nutrient content in it too, if you want to go that route. Where were we? Okay. Are there connections between the object of craving and a specific issue? Yeah, so that's kind of what we were touching on with the candida. Like a lot of times they can be craving more sugars when they're having candida. Um, Early blood sugar issues like early insulin resistance or diabetes, type 1 or type 2, those are other reasons that we'll see kids having like really serious cravings, or kids that are really sensitive to skipping meals. But just keep in mind that kids do need extra nutrition most of the time, so the goal is not to cut back on calories with them. It's just to make sure that they're getting well-rounded nutrition and that they're having everything kind of in moderation. So that's really like the number one thing you want to pay attention to. My husband is gluten free and has C. diff. Do we need to allergy test the young? Is your question to allergy test young? I don't know if I understand that question. The young?
I think they're asking if it's like hereditary, knowing that their parents have it, should they start testing their kids for it?
Oh, okay. So for gluten free, I would say yes. Because that can be a genetic trait. It can be inherited from somebody in the family. And the only way to truly diagnose gluten allergy, like true celiac disease, is through a biopsy. So a lot of times people will get a diagnosis of like gluten sensitivity or gluten allergy on a test, and that can be a really great place to start. And a lot of people benefit from cutting gluten out of the diet just based off that alone, because then it tells us the immune system is responding. But in order to know if there's actually damage that's going on in the gut lining, you would have to do a biopsy, which most people don't do. But um, gluten sensitivity is, I think, a lot more common than it's made out to be. And gluten is so weird. It can cause so many symptoms in people that I've seen that really like can disappear once it's cut out for an extended period of time. Even the most bizarre, like neurological type symptoms. So, um, it just can be hard when kids are younger because you have to substitute either like gluten-free options or find other ways to make sure that they're getting enough calories. So there's definitely ways to do it. It's just a little bit more challenging when they're that little. Can you speak a little bit more about tips and tricks? I'm getting a 23-month-old to try more foods. All he wants is puffs and liquids. um, yeah, I guess just kind of the stuff, like broad overview, the stuff that we talked about in there. I think like constantly exposing them to new things. If they do love colors, like get creative with it. Like create like a color wheel and like put a food of every single color on like a pie, or like maybe you guys create that ahead of time and then you match up the foods that go with it. Maybe they start to eat the foods as they're trying to match up like the foods and the colors that go with the different colors of the color wheel. Or like maybe even having pictures of food for them ahead of time and saying like having them point to the ones that they want, or like asking them like here's 5 things, what 2 things do you want to cook this week, and giving them a say in it so that they feel like they're a part of the decision. It's their decision, they're empowered to make a decision. And then when they don't want to eat it, you can also say, well, hey, you picked this out, so
Yeah, there are lots of puffs too nowadays. As like a, again, picky eater parent, like there's beet puffs, there's cauliflower puffs now, kale puffs. Like there's so many veggie puffs I've found along the ways at Whole Foods, that I've been just like, oh, you want veggies? Here's like the cauliflower puff, or here's like a, I mean, I don't know how nutritionally nutritious it is, because a lot of times if you look at labels, like veggie sticks aren't actually healthy for kids. Fun fact, I didn't realize that. But so be careful about that. But I think there are more like Whole Foods vegetables that are getting more creative in the puff form. It's been like a food trend out there, I read.
yeah, and I even see more and more that are now like organic and GMO free, which that never used to be a thing. So even if they are going to have puffs, just like opting into the ones that are organic, GMO free, just trying not to put anything extra in there that's going to be like added with pesticides or herbicides or glyphosate or anything that can disrupt that gut barrier from a young age. So yeah, that's really good advice. Um, so kids with frequent smelly flatulence but no other GI symptoms, sometimes kids just have stinky gas, but it could also be that they're having problems breaking down certain foods. So maybe try to pay attention to when they get it. This would be a time I would say to split foods up like a couple of hours in between and see if you notice it being associated with one food more than the other. So like for example, if you give them dairy and you wait a couple hours and you notice they get it, but then when they have chicken or fish or meat, they don't get it, maybe they're having maybe they're having a problem breaking down the enzymes in dairy and they need a little bit of digestive enzyme support with that. And then we'll sometimes see issues with enzyme deficiencies or kids not being able to break down foods as much if they do have that quote unquote dysbiosis, because when that happens, you may not be breaking foods down appropriately to get the proper building blocks to build up the enzymes that break down food. And so it may just be like an incomplete breakdown of food. And then sometimes when it sits in the GI system for too long, it can cause gas and flatulence, things related to that. Tips when it comes to children's stool collection, not the easiest thing. Yeah, so when we do stool tests, some of the companies we work for, we do urine and stool, will actually send out like a diaper that you can collect it in. So if they're still in diapers, you can put that on them, and if they'll go in it, that's the easiest way to collect it. Outside of that, if they are going on the toilet, like a lot of times the companies will give, they're like those hot dog containers that you would get at the park. And so you would actually go to the bathroom in that. They're pretty big to catch the stool. If they'll let you get in there and get it, that's the easiest way to do it. Can you share a brand that offers digestive enzymes for kids? There are different ones. I can't think of any specifically off the top of my head because I think a lot of them come in like blends in like more of like smoothie forms, but I can look into it, Kimberly, and then get back to you. We sometimes will give digest signs for kids. It's a process for or it's a product from Designs for Health, and they're really safe and tolerated well. You just have to dose it according to their age.
I was going to share, I'll share in the chat what I give to my kids. Obviously, I'm not a dietitian, so doctor, feel free to say, no, this is terrible. But
No,
if at all helpful to someone, I can share what I give my kids for fiber and digestive enzymes.
yeah.
And Jennifer, I think you have your hand raised. So feel free to go off mute and ask your question too. Thanks for being patient. Jennifer, are you still there? Not sure if we lost her or she doesn't hear. Are you there, Jennifer? Okay.
What do you think about high calorie nutrition shakes for kids like Pediasure? So it depends like what the reason is that you're giving it to them. If they're really not getting enough nutrition throughout their day, it's always going to be better to give them something to make sure they're eating. Just look out for like additional fillers or gums or anything that are in those complete nutrition meal shakes that could be like causing them any sort of digestive issues. But as long as they're acting fine, you're giving it to them and you don't notice like a big difference in weight gain, then I don't see a problem with it.
I think Jennifer's having some audio issue, but maybe she'll ask a question in the chat.
Yeah, if you have a question and want to throw it in the chat, we can read it from there too. His doctor had suggested him help, but he will skip his meal and just ask for the shake. I mean, in order to really know like what exactly is in it, I'd have to look at the nutritional label on the back. But a lot of those drinks will have like the proteins, the carbs, and the fats um, within it. So they're good as meal replacements, but for extended periods of time, I think it's better to incorporate in the food just so that he doesn't get reliant on them. And then when he goes to add foods back in, his digestive system is stressed out and doesn't remember what to do with it. But as long as he's eating foods still throughout the day and he's having those together, I don't see that being a huge issue. Could the reason why my 2-year-old be so picky is because he has undiagnosed gluten intolerance, as his father is gluten free, however, his pediatrician, she wouldn't test. It could be. So a lot of times when kids are gluten intolerant, they'll be having like underlying GI issues or like they just won't be feeling all that great. I know that we know our kids the best, but sometimes like when it becomes their normal, they don't really know anything else. So it's something that I would recommend testing for, especially if you said dad is gluten free and dad has a problem with gluten. Like I said, we see those going together pretty often. So it it wouldn't hurt to at least try like an experiment and cut it out. Usually when we are eliminating foods, we want to cut them out for about 28 days and then we reintroduce them slowly. So if you are going to cut it out, pick like a month or something where you can do that and then just kind of pay attention to see how he's feeling and see if it makes a difference. A lot of milk to get a picky 4-year-old to keep growing. Thoughts on adding Ovaltine or giving chocolate milk since he will never finish a glass of regular milk. I haven't looked at what's in Ovaltine in a long time. What's in Ovaltine? I know what it is.
I add to my son doesn't like drinking milk either. And I add Orgain. I don't know if that's good or bad, but do you know what Orgain is?
So I've seen that one before. Yeah.
It has
Is
like
it
veggie. They say it's lots of veggies combined together.
okay?
And that is how I get my son to drink milk. And I feel like I also sneaking in nutrients through Orgain. Again, not sure if it's good or bad, but it's better than Nestle chocolate, I feel like.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's 12 minerals and vitamins. I'm trying to look at the ingredients. The one thing I will say with a lot of these substitute drinks that you do want to look out for is um hydrogenated oils or like vegetable oils, because unfortunately there's a lot of them that are being put into these drink substitutes now, and even in like oat milks and different types of creamers and almond milks. So if it says like vegetable oil as one of the ingredients in it, or sunflower oil or canola oil, those are things I would try to stay away from, just because we know that those are pro-inflammatory and there's a lot of health risks associated with having them over a long period of time. So that, yeah, the thing with the Ovaltine, I think that I just found is it has like the corn, the whey and the corn maltodextrin and then malt extract, soy lecithin, non-fat milk. Um, the first ingredient in it is sugar. So, like I said, just making sure that like if they are gonna have it, you're trying to add in like fibers and fats with it so that they're not getting that like big sugar rush when they eat it. Hmm.
Yeah, I just shared Orgain. It looks like it doesn't have those oils in it that you mentioned,
Oh, good. Yeah.
but if helpful to anyone, just sent to everyone. Pediasure Grow and Gain. Oh, I don't know that one. That's a good one to keep in mind. I haven't looked what goes into Pediasure lately. Yeah. Does anyone have any other questions? All right, well, let's go through our last slide real quick. And thank you. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Cool. So Lily, Doctor, I'm not sure which one of you.
I can take it over.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, thank you guys for all spending your Friday afternoon with us. We really appreciate you being here. Hopefully some of the info that we just went over is helpful. Feel free to reach out to us if you have any more specific questions, but we are on the functional medicine side of things. So we do think a little bit differently than conventional medicine practitioners. Both are wonderful, both can be really helpful, but our goal is really to get to the root cause of what's going on with each kid individually. So if you feel like that's something that you want to learn more about, or if anything you said is relatable and you think something else may be going on with your little ones, feel free to give us a call. You can schedule a consult and talk to one of our team members. They can dive into this deeper with you. We do the no charge consult. So definitely take advantage of that. It's a great resource. They're super helpful. Even during the no charge consults, you may get some answers you didn't even know about. And then if you did want to do any of the children's programs with us today, you're going to receive one of the Body Love Cafe Child's Hero Capes. You're going to get a $50 supplement credit and also the Picky Eaters recipe booklet. So some great resources in there too. And I will let Lily take it away.
Thank you, everybody. I'm Lily, and I'm the manager of Body Love Cafe, and I will usually be the one that you'll be having a call with. It'll either be me or another one of our team members, and we'll really just communicate about what's going on with either you or your child. We do take adults as well. And we can discuss if functional medicine would really be a route that is good for you and your family. And you can also feel free to email us and ask any questions. I know I did get a couple of your emails to send some follow-up information that Dr. Dufala does. So that'll be great. Thank you all for joining us. This was so exciting.
Yeah, thank you guys. And thank you, doctor, for all your information, and Body Love Cafe for sponsoring this. I'll make sure all the information's, if anyone has questions and how to contact you, is in the follow-up email today. But thank you everyone for your time. And as always, check out. Yeah, thank you. And next Sprinkles Parent Seminar is going to be all about traveling with little kids. So if anyone's getting ready for the holidays with your picky eaters and trying to figure out how to travel, we'll have some details of how to travel with your little ones and tips and tricks to make it less chaotic and more at ease. So thank you everyone for joining. Appreciate it. Have a good one.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.